welcome to zip code, and today we're looking at another cup of code. We're focusing on Angular interceptors. So essentially interceptors are a powerful feature in Angular, so that allows us to actually intercept and modify HTTP requests and responses as well. So that happens just before you hit the server or receive a response to the client. So in this video, we'll cover the basics of Angular interceptors. That would include how you create an interceptor, how to use them, how to modify them, modifying the requests and responses, and how to handle errors on those requests as well. So without wasting any of your time, let's just go through the code and see how we can get that done. So what we left off on the previous video, if you're following our Angular tutorial, which I recommend you do, we were adding some HTTP headers here for addressing CORS, cross-origin resource sharing on that. So now we want to generate some interceptors, and we will start by creating, I want to add 3 interceptors here. One will be the authentication. So you'll see authentication will handle us passing through our JWT or our auth credentials just before any of our API requests go to the server. We can authenticate them correctly. So the other one that we want to do, I want to do a CORS one, which is a cross-resource sharing interceptor separately because I just want single responsibility for all my interceptors there. And also another one will be a logging interceptor, which we want to do here. So now I'll have 3 interceptors that are already available on my services. So before we go into each of those, we want to go to app modules, make sure that we add those interceptors here. So let's just add those. So the way that we're going to add those, we want to please provide us an HTTP interceptor and use a class which is authentication interceptor, which we have, and a multi-interceptor, make it true. So that's what we want to do, and we're gonna load all the other 2 interceptors as well. So here we want a cross origins resource sharing interceptor, which is what we added now, and then the next one is a logging interceptor to actually console log or log the data as you would want it to be logged on your requests. So now our interceptors are available in our app or globally in our application. So we want to now implement or add the logic for them. So let's come here, and quickly what we want to do here is let's start by changing that to any and changing that to any. So then that should be fine, and we will, what we want to do is to duplicate, we're going to call this authentication request. Want to actually clone the request that we receive. So clone this request, and after cloning it, we want to modify the request. So here we say headers, and we want to say request dot headers dot set. So after cloning the request, we clone the request here, and then we set headers for the cloned request, and we're going to take the headers from the request that already comes in and say set these headers for this particular request, which will be authorization here, authorization at this level, and we want to pass in obviously our bearer token here. Let's just do that quickly. Bearer let's say zip code token, right? So that looks good. And now that's done. So we want to say now handle that clone request, and everything looks good. So now we are done with the logic. This is what it does. So every subsequent request that we do to the server, it will have this header passed in, and as soon as you have you've authenticated and you have the your JWT token here, or whatever credentials that you'll be using, or API key or whatever, then you can pass that accordingly on the headers, and it should establish authorization for every request that you pass in. So now that's done for the authentication. So with the course, let's just do the same thing. So we are going to say const course request is equals to request the clone. Let's just sort these as well. Let's just say any. Let's just say any here. So let's just do that and that. So if you look at our integration service, you would have seen that on this request we had to do this like manually here, which is actually not the best way of doing it. So let's just get rid of that and just copy this so that we know which headers we added there. So let's just remove all of that. So now our function looks looks much more dedicated to doing one thing. So let's just go back to our course interceptor, and we can just put these here. That's fine. Okay, let's just broke our app there, but that's still not an issue. Let's just do this. Come on. Let me just take this from here, and I want to place this here so that nothing breaks. Right, cool. So that looks fine, and now we are going to come back here and say headers again, and we will say request dot headers and set. So here we are going to set the cross origin, which is that. Let's take that guy, let's put it here, and let's just do that. So that's fine. Then now we want to set another one. Set. Now we want to set this guy. We want to set this guy, and let's just set that first. Let's do the last one. Set and here. Alright, so now we can get rid of that, and now our request looks like that. Everything looks good, and we can take the request, just pass that in here. So now that looks good, and the next thing is our login interceptor. So here there's nothing fancy. We don't need to clone the request, we don't need to do anything, because we can just say console .log let's say request, right, and that's the only thing that we do. You can just say any, and you can just say any, so that's still fine. Right, so that should be fine, and nothing else. Or we can also just add something like console.log. Let's just say HTTP intercept request. Let's see here. HTTP intercept request payload, something like that. So if you want to put something like that, that will still be fine, which is not an issue. It's not an issue, right? So So far this looks good. Nothing fancy, and that's it for the interceptors. Everything looks good, everything is there, and I think this one comes in very handy um, when you submit your API. So let's just make sure that our API is still intact. So on the get, I'm going to change this function here because on the I want to get this response. So I will just do a get here, and I won't subscribe this at this level. I'll just say get that data from the API, and then what I'm going to do, where we do the call here, that's where I will actually subscribe that. And what I want to do is actually subscribe that to let's just call it response, and we can just say this is any, and then we will say I will change this heroes list into let's just do any here, and I want to say this dot heroes is actually equals to response, right? So subscribe is complaining about subscribe any type void. Let's just go there quickly, and this is, it should be fine because this is an observable, and that looks good, that looks good. We don't need to, oh actually we need to return the observable here, and then on our heroes everything should be fine, right? So now that looks good, everything is happy. So now when we check our app, so we can just ng build, just build it quickly and see this in action. And we'll actually see the log going through there on our logging interceptor as well. Let's see that in action. So it's going through now. It's gonna take a few minutes. So we already have our app here. It's ready, and we want to see on the console what's happening there. I think this is what was happening when I was debugging. And also guys, the APIs that I'm using here, if you check the integration APIs, if you're new, this I'm also developing the API on Spring Boot. So if you want to check that out, I recommend following my Spring Boot tutorial as well. That is from beginner, and we taking this step by step to see how you can get up and running in Spring Boot. And eventually with these two tutorials, and obviously more to be added as we go on the channel, we will uh, we will do some full stack development as we're doing now, seeing how we can use Angular to plug in our APIs and have a functioning application. So if you're looking at full stack, understanding everything from back end to front end to database, you'd want to subscribe, which I really would appreciate if you like, and join the team, and join the community actually of coders. So let's see this. There's no need for me to do that. I can just refresh this one. Let's see it. Okay, now that's back. Let's click on that. All right, so you see HTTP intercept request payload. So HTTP request, that's the request and the body and everything. So you can see the actual request here. So the headers that were passed in, let's see these headers: authorization, access allow across origin. You see all of these headers that we added on the other interceptors are already there, and the logging interceptor is telling us that this is what you requested, this is everything that you sent to the server, and obviously with the response as well we can do the same thing, but for now we just dealing with that. And we got our results, guys, and you saw in the previous tutorial we were logging our categories from on the console here, but now we have the list of categories here, which looks good, and which means our interceptors are working fine, everything is working fine. So now on the next one we'll be looking at actually interacting with our backend and doing the full CRUD operations. I hope you stick around and do like and subscribe, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Guys, sorry about that. So just before you go, we need to handle some exceptions on the interceptors. So let's do that quickly. So we've seen that our interceptors are working fine. So now what we want to do is let's just add some error handling here. So what we want to do, we want to pipe that. Come on, we want to pipe that. So let's just do it this way, and we will say catch error here, and we want to obviously catch this error. Let's just say exception. Yeah, I think exception will be fine. So it will be http error response. So that would be what we're trying to get there. And what we want to do here, we can just console dot log this, just log the exception, which is fine, and the other we are going to return and throw error just here, throw error, which is exception. Right, so that looks good, and now we're able to if anything happens on the request, then that should be what we are doing at that level. We console output the exception, and we are able to address the concerns at that level. And let's see, also in the course part we can do the same thing essentially. So let's just pipe this, and we actually want to catch this guy. So we're gonna catch error, and error will be handled at this level. So we want exception here, http error response. So let's just that. So we want to console log, and we want to exception here, which is fine. Then now we will return throw error here, and we are going to say exception. All right, so now we're done. This one is a logging one, so not really need to catch anything here because we're just logging the request as is. But where there's like implementation and some business logic that you're doing at that level, I would recommend catching the exception so that you know at which point did it break. So even here, you can even be more detailed and say console dot log. Let's say I want to say course http interceptor. That's what you have, so that you know that this exception was thrown at which interceptor. And I would copy this as well and save this and just add it here for the authentication interceptor, and I'll call this authentication interceptor. Right, so now here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stop my application here. So let's go back here, and I will then come back to this guy and refresh that. Right, so now let's do that. Boom. So now it failed, and obviously it's going to throw all of that, and we have an HTTP error response, which is coming from authentication HTTP interceptor. So you already see the authentication HTTP interceptor. This is the response that it got, and it's going to be should be not found, the API. Let's see the error code here. Let me just see the error code here. Resource not found exception should be along those lines. Let me see. Okay, HTTP error response, but that should be enough because it cannot actually get to the resource, and it's already giving us that, and we see that we are logging the failure as well. So by doing all of this, so even cause failed here, so that's that, and we're able to then query the API and say, is this resource available? What's going on there? Error connection refused, so that's something that we would be concerned about. So that's good. Our interceptors are working as expected. So that's it for this tutorial, guys. Really appreciate your time. Please do remember, like and subscribe. Cheers. See you in the next one.